Welcome, I'm delighted to be here with you again. It's Mentor Day, and this is the book review session. In today's session, my book of the day is the book called The Richest Man in Babylon by Judge Clason. Some call it Clason. I've recommended this book for a number of reasons. I think this is a unique read. It's a very small book. I love it very much because it's in story form. You know, you could see from the size that it's something you can read in a few hours. It's only 180 or 194 pages, and Judge Clason, I think, has done a lot of service to the world in writing this book. I think personally that is perhaps one of the most inspiring books on wealth and wealth creation that I've personally read. And I've read a lot of books. From my experience in looking back in time and observing the lives of people who I look up to, mentors and advisors and role models, I'm yet to find one who does not credit this book, or find someone who does not live, especially those who are wealthy, who does not live by the principles of this book. A lot of the books that have made a difference in so many people's lives financially are based off the principles of The Richest Man in Babylon. There's no doubt about it. My book, Unstoppable, if you haven't read it, I'm not plugging this in, by the way. It's about my journey to creating wealth and achieving financial freedom. Having come from Africa and having come from a very poor family and journeying through pursuing my goals and dreams, immigrating to London, and finally achieving my dreams of financial freedom, was influenced by The Richest Man in Babylon. A lot of the principles that I learned that made a difference in my life, I learned from The Richest Man in Babylon. And I found that the people that I studied as well, and the people who were my mentors, were also influenced by this book. I want to talk about a few ideas in the book that I think can make a difference. If you haven't read the book, it's also available in audiobook, so you can get an audio version. But it's a must if you consider yourself to be a student of life, if you consider yourself to be serious about creating the life extraordinaire, in other words, the life of your dreams, the abundant life, then The Richest Man in Babylon is a must. It's not just about wealth. It's a story about how to live. And it's a story about how individually we can change our lives and how we don't have to live the next 10 years like the way we've lived the last 10. The story begins with two people. And I want to draw your attention to a part of the story that resonated very deep within me. And before sharing that, let's say something. Babylon was known to have been the wealthiest city that ever existed. It was wealthy because the people were individually wealthy. They respected money. They had a lot of value for money. And as a result of that, they studied. They spent time and study to achieve wealth. They learned about the principles of wealth, and they passed on the principles, and they shared the principles amongst the community. So the wealth of a nation, the wealth of a country, is based on the individual wealth of the respective citizens. And individually, we have to do our part. The government doesn't make us wealthy. Some people are waiting for the government to change, for the community leaders to change, for the president to come about and make good on a promise. You see, but for things to change, you have to change first. And the people in Babylon realized this, and they began to change. So in the start of the book, there's a really interesting conversation between two friends. One of them is so deep in thoughts. His name is Arcad, so deep in thoughts that he didn't realize that his very good friend, best friend, Bansia, had walked into his environment. And when Bansia, his friend, asked him the question, "You look very down and sad. What is the problem?" Now, listen now, because this is so important. I don't want to narrate the whole story to you, but I want to draw your attention to something that I think just that knowledge alone is worth the entire price you pay for the book. Arcad says to his friend Bansia, "I had a dream. I had a dream." And that's what I want to talk to you about. If you want to change your life, you've got to start with a dream. Now, Arcad said, "I had a dream. And in my dream, I was a man who was wealthy. I was a man of means. I had a lot of money." Now, in reality, he was poor, very poor. They didn't have enough for himself and his family, let alone to share. But in this dream, he saw himself as wealthy. And so wealth, generally, this is a side statement, wealth begins with a dream. My journey began as a dream. My journey today is still a dream. I think it was President Harry Truman that said, "The Republic is a dream. We have to keep dreaming." And he said, in this dream, I was a man of means. And his friend said, "Well, if you had such a great dream, then why are you so sad?" And he said, "Because I finally woke up. And upon my awake, I realized that I was still poor. And so I'm sad because the reality of what I have is very different to that picture I saw in my mind, in my dream." He had tasted what it may have felt like to have the abundant life. If you want to be wealthy, you've got to create that picture of wealth in your mind. Without that picture, it's impossible to find the inspiration and the resolve and the focus and the determination and persistence to persevere. You cannot change what you're willing to tolerate. Arcad had tasted in his dream what it would feel like to have a better life. And that created a desire. And that's the second point I want to make. The first was dream. The second is desire. That activated a burning desire in his heart. A desire so powerful that it altered and changed his attitude and mood. He stopped working. His wife would come around and look at him and give him the glance that you should be working so we can get some money. But that burning desire had consumed him. It became an all-obsessive desire. We all need that. You've got to be obsessed about what you really want from life if you want to succeed. It has to be a healthy obsession, of course. But if there is no burning passion, if there is no burning desire, it's possible that just like a candle in the wind, your flames will be burned out very quickly. You have to have an obsessive focus about what you want. Now, this desire became so strong, and as he talked with his friend, he said, "I can't go back to the life that I've always lived. I really, really want to have wealth. I want to be able to help my family and help other people." Very noble desire. But here is the third point I want to talk about from the story. He realized that in order to become wealthy, he had to study wealth. And so, both of them decided that they would go and counsel with the wealthiest man in Babylon. You must forgive me. So far I've been talking about Arcad. Arcad was the wealthiest man in Babylon. The two friends were Bansia and Nomasir. Forgive me, it's been a while I read the book, but it's just come back to my mind. Nomasir and Bansia were the two friends who were talking. Arcad was the wealthiest man. So the two friends went looking for the wealthiest man because they had talked about it and said, if we can get this man, who is the wealthiest man in Babylon, to teach us what he knows, perhaps we can create a better fortune, we can create a better future for our family. The third point that I want to make is this. If you want to be successful, study success. If you want to be wealthy, study wealth. If you want to be happy, you have to study happiness. Time and study is needed for creating wealth. So they went and they sat down with Arcad and they said, listen, we grew up together and we've worked just as hard as you have, but we don't understand why you have so much wealth and you've amassed so much wealth, and we cannot even afford to feed our families the way we would want to. Now here is the response from Arcad to Bansia and Nomasir. I want you to remember this because I think it's so classic. This changed my thinking. His response was, if you do not have wealth and you haven't amassed the level of wealth you want, then it comes down to two reasons. You do not know the laws of wealth. You haven't studied the laws of wealth. Now that was like a light bulb moment for me when I started my journey on creating wealth, because suddenly I realized that shit, there are laws of wealth. I didn't know about that. But he also said, number two, but even if you know the laws of wealth, you do not obey and apply them. Whoa. Again, another light bulb moment. Simply meaning it's not about knowledge. It's not about information. We have so much information around us. I have a lot of books. So when it comes to knowledge, there's just too much. I'm saturated with information. You have access to all of the information in the world. The libraries have hundreds of thousands of books. Library cards are free. Very few people go into libraries. So when it comes to accessibility to knowledge or information, that is not the excuse. The problem is we don't study and then apply or obey the laws of wealth. But Arcad said to the two men, I started just the way you started, but I had a desire and I learned by asking someone else. Now this is the key point I'm trying to make. The word study is almost sacred as far as I'm concerned. Nomasir and Bansia, the two men who were having the conversation to start with, went to the wealthiest man. The wealthiest man said, you haven't learned the laws of wealth and you do not study and apply them. And they said, okay, well, how did you start? Can you teach us how to become wealthy? And he said, well, I started with nothing. I haven't started below zero, but I had to learn the laws of wealth from someone else, which I think was very, very important for me. It was important in simply making me understand that one of the most important things we must do is use the concept of leverage. The person that Arcad had learned from was someone else who was the wealthiest person at the time, or very wealthy, called Algamish or something like that. I might make him, that might not be the way it should be pronounced, but I think it's called Algamish. Akkad was poor, but he found someone wealthy, and he said to the wealthy man, "Can you teach me?" Here is the point. Leverage is a concept that we undervalue. The most important leverage is the leverage of OPE, other people's experiences. You can read this book in 2 hours, and what you've learned in 2 hours could have taken someone 40 years to really understand. That's called leverage. So Akkad explained that he had learned a principle from someone else who was wealthy, and then he shared this principle. And he encouraged them, and he guided them, and he mentored them. And so the book provides a number of useful points. It tells you about various laws. It talks about the laws of gold, talks about luck, talks about how to create money, how to acquire money, how to protect it, how to multiply it, and how to pass it on. It's a very, very useful book. Now let me draw this to a close with a few statements. The most important part of what I think you must begin to apply if you want to become wealthy is you must learn the concept called pay yourself first. We've heard that so many times. Most people hear the concept pay yourself first and they think it means spend on yourself first. But that's not what I'm talking about. The difference between the poor and the wealthy comes down to a formula. The formula for poverty is simple. P equals E minus S minus S. Simply meaning poor people earn. When they earn, the first thing they do is spend, and whatever they have left after spending, they save. For many years I did that, and that meant I had nothing to save because I spent more than I earned. Wealthy people, on the other hand, apply a different formula. They apply the concept from the richest man in Babylon. They use a formula called W equals E dash I dash S. In other words, wealthy people they earn the same amount of money in this instance as the poor. The first thing they do, however, is they invest. And once they've set aside their investment, they spend what's left. The difference then lies in what you do when you're paid. It's not the amount that counts. It's the activity following your earning. Poor people spend first. Wealthy people invest first. In The Richest Man in Babylon, it says, a part of what you earn is yours to keep, and encourages you to set aside a minimum of 10% of what you earn so that you can invest. Now, this is the difference. Not so that you can save, so that you can invest. Saving is an obsolete strategy for creating wealth. You don't save actively. You might save passively, but here is my recommendation, and I talk about this a lot in my book, Unstoppable. If you're saving for more than 12 months, you're losing money. The inflation rate today in London is 2.9, let's call it 3%. So if you had £1,000, for example, at the start of January, when you go through the whole year after 12 months, if you were saving your money at the end of the year, because of inflation, now listen to this now, because of inflation, what you find is 3% of that £1,000 is left in terms of purchasing power. So what you could pay for £1,000, you find by the end of the year, that might only buy you something worth, let's say maybe 900 and £965. So you're losing money. The key is to invest, not save. You can save passively, perhaps with the intention of investing, but the key is not to let it stay too long. And here is why. Because every day that goes by that you're not investing your money, or your money is not invested, your money is not working for you. The key to wealth, the whole key to wealth, has to do with investment income. It has to do with how much money you're earning from your investment. It has less to do with your net worth. It has more to do with your income stream and income flow. What is your investment creating? Now, there are various nuggets of wisdom in this book, but also that I've learned. One of the things the book talks about is when you now have your money as a slave working for you, you must then reinvest what your money earns. So you have £1,000, for example, you find an investment that pays 10% in terms of return. At the end of the year, you make £100. You don't spend the £100. You reinvest the £100 with the 1,000. That's how you activate the compounding principle, which Albert Einstein said is the eighth wonder of the world. I can spend 24 hours just talking about the concepts in this book, but also the concept of wealth, because there's just so much content and so much value in the book. Let me end with a statement. Wisdom is the principal thing. King Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived, wisest king who ever lived, and the wealthiest who ever lived. To give you the context of King Solomon's wealth, it would take you a shorter time. It's easier. You were closer. Let me use that word. Bill Gates is the wealthiest man alive today, worth 97 billion or something like that. You were closer to Bill Gates in terms of achieving wealth than Bill Gates was closer to Solomon. That's how powerful it is. Someone who has nothing is closer to Bill Gates' wealth than Bill Gates was close to Solomon's wealth. Just the gold reserves from Solomon's wealth was worth more than £1 trillion, $1 trillion, whatever currency you want to use. In this case, I'm using pounds because pounds is much more valuable than the American dollar. He was really wealthy. But he said something that I find fascinating. He said, wisdom is the principal thing. And in all you're getting, get understanding. Get understanding. And in the book, in every section of The Richest Man in Babylon, mention is made of the importance of wisdom and the importance of knowledge and the importance of seeking advice from wise counsel, the importance of ensuring that your investments are made following the guidance and the wise steps and principles of those who have achieved wealth. The emphasis is on wisdom. You can let go of all of the money you have. But if you have wisdom, you can get it back. It's less about what you create. It's about who you are. Wisdom makes you who you are. And The Richest Man in Babylon shows you ways in which you can become the kind of person deserving of the dream or the goal you have. The focus is not about money. The focus in the book is about who you have to become and what you have to learn. I hope that's been useful. Allow me to wish you the best of luck. I hope you get the book. I think it's certainly worth having.